In the summer of 1960, Marvin Gaye walked onto the practice field at Detroit Lions training camp and asked to be evaluated as a running back. He was 21 years old. He had been telling people for months that he could play professional football. He could not at that level. The Lions knew it within the first few days. Marvin knew it by the end of the week. What happened after that? In the weeks that followed the camp, in the months that followed the rejection, is the story of how one failure became the necessary condition for everything else. To understand why Marvin was there at all, you have to understand what professional football represented to him in 1960. It was not simply athletic ambition, though he was genuinely athletic, fast and coordinated in ways that his years of street basketball in Washington, D.C. had developed into something real. It was something more specific, a way of becoming something that his father could not dismiss. Marvin Gaye Sr. had never taken the music seriously. The singing, the choir, the hours Marvin spent at the piano, these were, in Gaye Sr.'s framework, not accomplishments. They were indulgences. Professional sports was different. Sports was something a man did, something you could measure, rank, verify. If Marvin could make the Lions, he would have something in his hands that his father could not simply wave away. He did not make the Lions. The camp evaluation was thorough enough to be definitive. He had speed and natural instinct, and neither of those was sufficient. The coaches were polite. Marvin drove back to Detroit carrying the specific weight of a plan that had not survived contact with reality. What happened next moves quickly in the historical record, and it is worth slowing it down. Harvey Fuqua had known Marvin since 1958, when the Moonglows came through Washington, and Marvin, who had been a devoted student of their records, managed to put himself in the same room. Fuqua had heard something in the young man from the beginning, not a finished talent, but a raw material of an unusual kind. When Marvin returned from the Lions camp, Fuqua was positioned to offer an alternative. Fuqua had recently married Gwen Gordy, Berry Gordy's older sister, which had made him, in the informal architecture of early Motown, a bridge between the label and the wider Detroit music world. He brought Marvin to Gordy. The meeting was brief, by most accounts. Gordy was not immediately overwhelmed. He took him on as a session musician first, a drummer initially, before the voice made its case more forcefully. The solo deal came later that year. What Gordy saw, eventually, was what Fuqua had seen in Washington 2 years earlier. A particular quality of vocal instrument that did not announce itself in the way that obvious talents do, but that revealed itself under certain conditions with an authority that other voices in the room could not match. Gordy knew what to do with that. Marvin spoke about the Lions' tryout in interviews over the years, though not extensively. What he said, when he said anything, was that he was grateful it had not worked, that he had needed the door to close in order to go through a different one. The formulation is familiar, the retrospective gratitude for failure. But in this case, it is also, by any measure, accurate. Consider what a successful Lions career would have meant. Running backs in the early 1960 seconds NFL played 5 to 8 years, if they were fortunate, and did not suffer career-ending injury. The contract would have been modest. The league's financial structure was nothing like what it would become, and at the end of it, Marvin Gaye Jr. would have been 30 years old, with a body that had absorbed several seasons of professional contact, and no Motown, no "what's going on," no "I heard it through the grapevine," no "let's get it on." The specific architecture of everything that followed required the Lions to say no. There is a version of this story that casts the failure as a gift. The universe correcting a wrong turn, redirecting talent toward its proper use. That version is true in outcome and misleading in character. Marvin did not experience it as a gift in the summer of 1960. He experienced it as a rejection, and the rejection arrived on top of everything else he had been told by the authority in his house about what he was worth. What it actually was, what it turned out to be, was a door. Not a sign, not a redirection, not a lesson. A door. When the Lions camp ended, Marvin had no plan. Fuqua had a connection. Gordy had a label. The session work began. The voice made its case. Within 2 years, Stubborn Kind of Fellow was on the radio. Within 5 years, I Heard It Through the Grapevine had been recorded. Within 11 years, What's Going On had been made and released and placed on lists that no Lions roster appearance would have approached. He went to the training camp to prove something to his father. He failed. He went to Motown instead. What he proved to his father there, whether he proved anything at all, whether it was ever enough, is a different story, and a longer one. But the music exists. 44 years of it, starting from a summer when a running back who could not make the Lions drove back to Detroit and found a different kind of field to run on. The Lions cut him. Fuqua called. Gordy signed him. The rest is what it is, which is more than any football career was going to be.